Hello, I'm Sarah Von Fisher from PwC, and this is a special live recording of Take on Tomorrow, the podcast from PwC's management publication, Strategy and Business, where we ask how business can help solve some of the biggest issues facing society. I'm joined now by Will Jackson Moore, PwC's Global Sustainability Leader. And Will, we're so glad you're on the podcast.
Pleased to be here, Sarah.
So, Will, I want to start off with a question about, what it's been like to be here at Climate Week. What's the feeling on the ground here?
I think if I compare the kind of feeling on the ground to maybe last year is a recognition still that we absolutely aren't moving fast enough and we need to accelerate, but maybe some glimmers of hope as well. I'm hearing particularly in the renewable energy space, just the pace of acceleration of deployment of renewable energy solutions around the world is going probably faster than people thought. So that's kind of part of that curve. And I think we often overestimate the initial pace of change and underestimate the medium-term pace of change. And I think we're starting to see that now. But as I said, we are reaching some of those kind of vital tipping points. I think 1.5 is going to be super challenging unless we really move quickly. And the other takeaway is kind of the conversations around technology. Some really interesting discussions there.
Yeah, in the theme this year from Climate Group is "We can, we will," which sounds really optimistic. But is that what you've been hearing as you've been in sessions and talking with people here?
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think that really reflects that we can. For me, is a lot of the technology that we need to do or to implement is already there, particularly on renewables. And this is the kind of no-brainer move. We need to really push hard on renewables around the world, which is a combination of providers of finance, the energy companies, the regulators, the utilities, all working together to get those renewables deployed quickly as we approach and come up with concepts to deal with the hard-to-abate areas. I mean, combined with we need to do a lot around the energy demand side. You think about a lot of the conversations we have, it's typically supply side. How do we decarbonize electricity supply and energy supply? You hear a lot less discussion around how do we use energy more efficiently. And so I am hearing more around that energy demand management, which is absolutely crucial for us.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in just a bit more. But, the other half of the slogan is "we will." And so that's sort of the actions to be taken.
Yeah, the people in this room, they will. It's the people who aren't in the room, which is the challenge. Because, as I say, there are some solutions and we need to drive change. I think we are the catalyst of change. We're the lucky ones who come to hear the really high quality speakers, but we've got to go and disseminate that and drive action in not just our work environment, I think the whole kind of ecosystem that we live in.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about regulation. We've had this conversation before that maybe, large corporations actually want more regulations. Tell us more about that, and maybe when it comes to climate. Is that something that you're hearing as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's a highly unusual situation where you hear big corporations say, we would like to see more regulation. I think they are kind of quite measured in what they say about where they would like additional regulation, but it's specifically around climate. And I think the reason for that is the corporates who are here are generally the front runners. They get this. They're ahead of the regulation. They're ahead of government. They are really wanting to drive change, not only through their own organizations, but they're kind of the more challenging Scope 3 emissions in their supply chains. And they're doing it, often at a cost disadvantage to their rivals who aren't here in the room. And therefore, they see regulation as a way of driving change more quickly, but they aren't just being entirely altruistic. It gives them a competitive advantage because they're already ahead of it.
All right. Well, I want to talk a little bit about a roundtable that you co-hosted, and it's called "How to Navigate the Messy Middle to Accelerate Decarbonization Today." And it's kind of an interesting concept, this messy middle. It maybe means different things to different people about how you think of it. But what would you say the messy middle is? And tell us a little bit about that discussion.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's a few different ways to interpret it. I mean, one lens for me is the fact that in terms of the climate agenda, historically, it's kind of been either a CEO conversation because they're responsible for kind of medium-term strategy, or a chief sustainability officer kind of responsibility because that's kind of in their job description. However, what's happening now is it's moving right across the C-suite because in order to drive change, the whole organisation has got to be bought into it. And that kind of messy middle between the chief exec and the chief sustainability officer is a big area of focus. And it's really driving a change for the role of the chief sustainability officer. They're no longer seen as the person who's kind of like responsible for it. Their job is now to basically educate the whole C-suite and their teams in order to drive change and support those C-suite members in driving the change down their own kind of sub-organisations. Because it's great that you get, say, a chief operating officer brought in. They've got to get all their plant managers and their line managers and their supply chain as well. And that's kind of this, for me, this concept of the messy middle brings it together.
And during that panel discussion, were there any key takeaways that you got? Did other people feel like they were caught too, maybe in the messy middle at this point?
The big takeaway was demand side. A lot of the conversations we hear about supply side is about renewables, replacing fossil fuels. The best decarbonisation is not to use energy in the first place. And that efficiency is a huge opportunity. Many organisations are easily going to save 10, 20, 30% of their energy just by using existing systems, technologies more efficiently. That's before you then get to the kind of light capex opportunities to reduce. And then beyond that, the kind of harder to abate, which does require some more significant capex. So that kind of three-tier approach really resonated for me in the discussion.
What's keeping companies maybe stuck from doing that, or why aren't they able to do that more easily?
Yeah, there's lots of excuses, but basically there is no good reason why any companies cannot be more energy efficient. It's typically because it isn't high up the agenda. People are usually more interested in launching new products, building new factories, moving into new markets. Kind of energy efficiency is not seen as particularly sexy. If you talk to most COOs, they all have energy reduction plans kind of in the cupboard, on the drawing board. They just haven't been implemented. One of the things that came out of the discussion is, should large energy users have a chief energy officer whose job is to drive energy efficiency? There's some pluses and minuses of that, but I think it's a really interesting debate to have with big organizations.
And I think that it actually does make business sense to do it, right? I mean, it can be a cost savings or even making money.
Cost out is carbon out. The less energy you use, it improves your profitability, improves your CO2 footprint. But we had an example from one large corporate who'd entered into some virtual power agreements. And they were making millions of dollars a year through putting in place those clean energy schemes. So, yeah, no, it absolutely doesn't need to be its profit or its decarbonisation. The most sophisticated organisations are driving both in parallel.
And you've touched on it a little bit, but what about the opportunities for businesses that get it right, the ones that make those bolder moves a little bit earlier?
That ties into this kind of whole debate around whether management teams who focus on this are meeting their fiduciary duties of driving profitability. For me, the two things are not divorced. You don't have a value plan over here and a sustainability plan over here. The two are inextricably linked. You have a strategy, a business plan, a value creation plan that is sustainable, creating sustainable value. I mean, I think any asset manager, management team who isn't looking out 10, 15 years and seeing big climate risks, big energy risks, and if they're not addressing that, really are they creating value for their stakeholders?
And do you think that's something that businesses are realizing a little bit more now? I mean, maybe this Climate Week compared to past years?
Yeah, absolutely, that they are. Are enough of them recognizing it and enough of them moving quickly enough? No, but absolutely it's going higher and higher up to the business agenda. And I think it's going to everybody's agenda. I mean, you cannot have looked at the news this last 6 months and not thought something's happening to our climate. I mean, the number of disasters, fires, floods, the planet is saying something to us and we need to act.
So tell me a little bit about some of the new technologies that are maybe moving things along.
Technology has a vital role to play. And I think what you're starting to see is some of the technologies around renewables, batteries, mobility, they're starting to get more mature now. So they're kind of moving out of the venture capital phase, more into the growth and the mainstream investment phase. Yes, there'll always be a big investment into battery technology to drive efficiency and so on. So it's not like it's done, But what I mean is, as a concept, people are kind of understanding that more now. And I think that allows them more investment into those really harder to abate areas. Kind of, we're starting to see green steel investment. We're starting to see technologies around cement, for example. I think the next wave is going to really be into chemicals. Chemicals very kind of dependent on the hydrocarbon chains, but the more that we challenge people to come up with chemical solutions that aren't as dependent on hydrocarbons, I think it's got to be the next kind of frontier.
What's your summary of what you will be thinking about as you wrap up here and go to your daily life and your daily job?
I'll go away with a degree of optimism around the acceleration in clean energy. So that, for me, is probably the biggest positive.
Thank you so much, Will, for joining us here on Take On Tomorrow. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sarah.